physical therapists can help to, if it's not completely torn, helping to rehab and get them back to what they're playing before going the surgery routes, or if the injury is too severe, we would go after surgery and help them with the recovery.
What is one of the biggest challenge? Is it the paperwork? Is it, physical, emotional?
The physical toll definitely is a fact. One thing that you have to really learn how to do is not take the emotional side of your work home with you.
Hey everyone, welcome back to FutureMed, where I talk to doctors and healthcare professionals about what they do, how they got there, and what advice they have to teens like us who are thinking about going into the medical field. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Jaylen Hiller, a doctor of physical therapy at Atrium Health. I met him at a STEM prep event, and I'm really excited to ask him some questions about his journey and what physical therapy is all about. Let's get into it. So, Dr. Hiller, can you tell us a little bit about your background and what led you to become a physical therapist?
Yeah, absolutely. So, a little bit about my background. So, I'm originally from Georgia. I went to Kennesaw State University for my 4 years of undergrad, where I went and majored in exercise science. So, learning about exercise programming, kind of the ins and outs of exercise physiology and kind of how exercise affects the body. And then I went on to the University of South Carolina, went to attend their doctorate in physical therapy program for 3 years. And now I'm currently entering my third year of clinical practice with Atrium Health as a physical therapist. And so in addition to that, I've kind of taken over the past couple of years, getting into the sports performance space as well. And so helping kids, with their movement competency, just helping them move better, helping them to um, improve their movement quality for whatever sports or whatever activities that they like to do. And then also on the injury prevention side of that as well, helping kids to manage pain, keep pain away, and then also help them recover from minor injuries they have, things like ankle sprains, knee pain, things like that. And so um, my focus has shifted a little bit, I guess, over the past 3 years with clinical practice, but something I enjoy nonetheless.
Yeah, that's cool to hear because man, I've had my fair share of ankle sprains and those hurt a lot. So, what kind of training or schooling, does like a physical therapist go to? And how much education, goes into becoming a physical therapist?
So physical therapy is actually, I would say, a lifelong learning profession. There's always something new that we have to learn. There's always something new about new research, new treatment techniques, um, new interventions that we have to stay up to date with. The basic education to get into the field is overall about 7 years. And so 4 years of undergrad, give or take, depending on how long people take to finish that. And then 3 years of doctorate level program. For some people, it is 6.5. And so there's been this kind of new advent of hybrid DPT programs where people do some of the work from home and some of the work in person. But overall, it's about 7 years. And then if people desire to go to like a residency program or some kind of fellowship, then they can obviously have the option to pursue that as well. So.
Yeah, that's a really long journey. And after this training, which other places can you work in? Is it just a clinic or is it just more than clinic, like the Ortho Carolina and stuff like that? How does it go?
So physical therapists can actually work in a lot of settings. So for me, for the first about 2 years of my clinical practice, I was working in the hospital setting. So I was working in acute care for people who were like post-op, people who were maybe different cardiac conditions. There's the neurological floor for people that have like brain or spinal cord injuries. And then there's also the inpatient rehab route. So that's more so the neuro rehabilitation. And so that was where I found a lot of my interest in clinical practice was for people that had those, again, strokes, brain injuries, spinal cord injuries, trying to help them return to function. Other settings physical therapists can work in, we can work in nursing homes or skilled nursing facilities. helping people to, again, rehab in a little bit less of a intense setting with that. Physical therapists are employed by sports teams. They're employed by outpatient clinics. They're employed by schools. People can work as physical therapists in elementary schools, middle schools, high schools. There's pediatric clinics for people that desire to work with kids for different pediatric conditions. The list goes on and on. There's specialties for things like lymphedema and sports. Um, and then this, I don't want to say new, but definitely growing avenue of physical therapy is pelvic health for postpartum. So mothers that have just gone through childbirth or perhaps preparing for it and are feeling some of those symptoms as well. And then also different, urogenital diseases and complications and things like that. So there's a lot of avenues outside of the Ortho Carolinas and the benchmarks that people typically think of when they think of PT.
Yeah, and going back to your first point, you talked about the post-surgery and stuff like that. So is the practice of physical therapy, is it usually before surgery, trying to prevent the surgery from happening, or is it once like the recovery, or is it both?
So it's a little bit of both. And so in I'd probably say about half and half.
A rewarding case, that's really stuck with you so far?
So that's a little bit of a hard question because there's multiple cases that definitely you have those moments that it definitely sticks with you. I would say either for better or worse, but I would say the better side of what I've seen is I remember specifically there's one case. It wasn't me specifically working with the patient. I worked with them a couple of times. But it was essentially a patient that had come in. They had just had what we call a central spinal cord injury. And so essentially this patient was not able to walk independently. They were basically in a wheelchair for the first couple of weeks. Um, and so for those next, I think it was like probably next couple of months or so, the biggest thing was really A, getting them independent with the wheelchair, and then also making sure that they progress with their walking, right? Because especially younger patients that have those kinds of neuro injuries like spinal cord injuries and even strokes or brain injuries in some cases, um, younger patients tend to see a better recovery. They tend to recover a lot quicker with their function. And so for this patient specifically, I remember being with them on their intake when they were in the wheelchair, and by the time they discharged, they were actually able to be able to walk with some assistance. And so that was something that was really gratifying. And then actually fast forward, keep in mind this was like 2019, I believe. No, no, I'm sorry. That was like 2021, 22.
Okay.
And then fast forward, I would say about last year or so, this patient actually came back to visit their main therapist, and they were actually walking. They had the cane in their hand, but they actually didn't need it. And so they were able to walk into the hospital under their own power. So to be able to see them progress from being in a wheelchair, literally the day, or not the day, but see them in a wheelchair on day one, and then a couple of years later, now they're walking on their own and doing all the things that they want to do again. Those are definitely the kinds of moments that stick with you. So,
Yeah, I'm sure those are most rewarding. I've always heard of people talking about these cases. I've never actually talked to a doctor about this, so it's really cool to hear that insight. And you mentioned about that paperwork and how doctors have to, some doctors bring it home and stuff like that. What is one of the biggest challenge? Is it the paperwork? Is it, physical, emotional? What would you say is the biggest challenge?
so in the setting that I work in the acute care setting, I would definitely say that most of it is physical. You're definitely, I would say in probably half of the cases, you're helping the patients probably about 50% of their body weight or 50% of the effort. And so excuse me, let's say a patient can't stand on their own, and so you're having to basically use your strength to help them get up or transfer them to a chair or, help them get to the bathroom. And so the physical toll definitely is a factor. I would say as a physical therapist, the biggest thing really in healthcare as a whole is probably the emotional factor or the mental side of it. The reality is that if you enter into healthcare, you usually care about people. and you care about their recovery. And one thing that you have to really learn how to do is not take the emotional side of your work home with you. That is one thing that's not even as a therapist, just in healthcare and whole as a whole, is really being able to tell yourself, I have to keep this at work. I can't take the emotional burden of this case home with me because it's really, really easy to do that and get hung up on that. And so I would probably say that's the hardest part, probably the first thing you have to learn, probably within your first couple of years, is that it's okay to feel that empathy and be able to, care for those people, but you also have to kind of take a step back and say, okay, how is this affecting my mental health as well? Because if you're not fully present mentally and emotionally, then your patients will definitely feel that as well. So I'd probably say that's the biggest challenge.
Yeah, that's like not the side that people think about. Physical therapist is not just about, stretching. It definitely has a lot of responsibilities to it.
For sure. Because I would definitely say it's kind of a joke in the profession where we're not just physical therapists, we're therapists too.
Yeah.
Because we're the people that people trust with their life stories, with their life updates and everything. And so again, kind of taking on, I guess, that secondary role as a mental therapist as well as a physical therapist. So again, having to separate that emotional from that um, occupational side.
Yeah, most definitely. And
Hmm.
if we shift to the teens, there's so many issues, with the posture and stuff like that. And I mean, I could say too, as a high school student, I'm getting some back pain. So, do you have any tips and advice on how we can actually take care of our own body better?
Yes. So I would say probably the biggest thing is one, limiting screen time. I think that especially post-COVID when we had um, especially the advent of online and virtual learning, especially kind of what I'm seeing as a professor now, um, is that that has impacted a lot of how people move. That's impacted a lot of how people go about their daily lives, especially with the advent of things like working from home. A lot of people are stuck in that kind of forward flex posture, not really standing up throughout the day. And so the biggest thing I would say is probably whenever you get a chance, just go outside, like get off the phones, take a walk. Um, do some squats, do some push-ups, whatever you need to do. Movement is medicine in this profession, and so being able to get up and move as much as you can, especially being young, being teenagers, early 20s, whatever the case may be, this is probably if not the strongest, one of the strongest portions of your life, where you're going to be the most independent all the way up until probably about the 50s. And so, really taking advantage of that youth and being able to move your body how you want to now, because how you move now in your teens and your 20s and even your early 30s is going to set you up for how you move when you're older as well, which a lot of people don't think about that.
Long
Kind of
term.
looking into the future like that, that long term. But uh, there's definitely a trend between how active you are in your early years, but how active you'll be in your later years.
Because, I've always seen, I mean, even with me and other people, we have like the phone over here and then our back kind of tends to hump. And then, once that happens, it's really hard to like, go back to having like a straight kind of posture.
Hmm.
So yeah, definitely technology. I mean, yeah, it's really changed a lot. And as we move into the modern day, are there any cool technologies and the use of AI in physical therapist? Because I had a talk with my pediatrician before, and he talked about how he has like an AI that helps does his nose for him and everything. So
Hmm.
is that kind of anything similar with you in physical therapy?
There is. So there are tools for AI for physical therapists to use for documentation purposes. Um, there's even, I won't say it's AI, but it is a form of medical technology in the hospital setting. I think it's called Dragon, I believe it is, where basically physicians can use almost like a microphone to like talk their notes into the screen and then obviously edit it as they need to.
Yeah.
Um, in physical therapy treatment wise, there's a lot of good technology for especially people that has suffered spinal cord injuries. Something called a light gate. So it's basically assistive walking technology. You basically put the patient in a harness and it basically supports their body weight as they attempt to walk and as they attempt to move their legs. So kind of giving, and it's especially useful in like the older population that's like at higher risk of falls.
Yeah.
being able to do balance training without having to physically support the patient. So the patient, if they fall over, this body weight support just holds them up and keeps them from falling to the ground. Um, and then there's also different technologies using things like electrical stimulation for things like foot drop, wrist drop. So like if a patient can't use their hand or if they can't pick up their foot to walk. And then there's also a lot of good treatment options for virtual reality as well. And so kind of appeases to the patients that like to play video games,
Yeah.
or at least just like to have fun on that end with technology. They put the virtual reality on, and then even though it's not really a standalone treatment, it's really good in conjunction with other like conventional physical therapy as well. So being able to like see the virtual reality and like play games and use their arm and their leg um, as a therapeutic tool is really, really cool. So.
Yeah, that's really cool to hear. I did not know we could use VR for that. Side question, whenever people are walking with crutches, I've tried crutches, and for some reason they always hurt. I don't, how are you supposed to, properly hold the crutches? Are you supposed to put it in like your shoulders? Are you supposed to put it below the pec? I mean, I just can't figure it out, because whenever I walk with them, they just hurt my arms too much.
So that's a funny question. A lot of people when they use crutches, they put them too high. And
Yeah.
so if the crutch is too high, it gets kind of jammed up in your armpit, like you say, and causes a lot of pain. It's actually supposed to get, you're supposed to have like maybe a finger or two to be able to push between like your armpit and the crutch. Otherwise, you're gonna see people just walking around like this with crutches all day, and it's probably not a good look for you. It's not probably very comfortable either. And a lot of people put like towels on there.
Yeah.
One thing that they do, I believe it's in Europe right now. They actually don't use conventional crutches like we do here in America. They use, I don't know if you've ever seen those crutches where they have like the handle here and it's like a little kind of cup that goes right around the elbow. So it's not the
Okay.
conventional crutches that they use in the armpits. It's almost like forearm crutches. That's the word. Um, because it provides a little bit more ability and again, you're not jamming something in your armpit too. So crutches is always a an interesting topic because every time I see somebody like walking around with them, I always see them like jammed into their armpits. I'm like, hey, why don't you try this? Because yeah, it doesn't look too comfortable. So
Yeah. And for I feel the most important question for students who are thinking about becoming a physical therapist like you one day, what would you suggest steps that they take right now, going through their undergrad, their med school, and so on?
so the biggest thing I would recommend, especially early for those like freshmen, sophomores, kind of looking into it, make sure it's what you want to do first. And how do you do that? You do that through different shadowing opportunities. So I don't really know many physical therapy clinics that would shoot down people for asking if they could observe or if they could come in and watch. Might be a little bit more tricky in the hospital setting or the nursing facility setting, but especially in like your Ortho Carolinas and your benchmark place types of places, it's pretty easy to send them an email and say, hey, can I come observe for a day? And so observing to make sure it's actually what you do want to do is the first thing. The second thing is doing a lot of research on what the prerequisite classes are for physical therapy school. And so when I was going through the application process, excuse me, I believe it was two biology courses, no, two biology courses, two chemistry courses, so Gen Chem 1, Gen Chem 2,
Yeah.
um, anatomy and physiology, of course, so A&P 1, A&P 2. We had to take a version of statistics, and we had to take, I believe, one or two psychology courses. So I think for me, I took developmental psych. And so those are considered the eight prereqs to get in. And then, of course, other programs have their own requirements. Some require you to take like an exercise phys course or something like that. But um, I definitely recommend that. The next thing I would recommend is that students do some research about maybe some schools in their state. The reality is, physical therapy school is not a cheap endeavor. It's one of those things you have to be financially prepared to take on. And so I always recommend people do public schools and in-state schools. If you live in North Carolina, going to Texas for PT school is probably going to be a very expensive venture for you. So trying to stay in state as best you can is probably the best option, especially if you can find like a family member or somebody or a roommate to live with during that time. That'll probably cut down on a lot of that. And then Uh, GRE scores, it really just depends on what the school requires. Some schools require it, some don't. So it just kind of depends on what your individual school that you're applying to wants. But yeah, I would say that's probably the biggest thing in terms of wanting to get admitted. Physical therapy school is very competitive to get into. A lot of the students that you see getting in are pretty high achieving students. They're the ones getting the 3.8s and above. They're the ones getting all the observation hours. They're the ones, going above and beyond to make sure their resume is 10 pages long. And so really making sure, especially that you put your effort into those prerequisite classes to come out with the highest possible grade you can, because it can get pretty competitive, especially when you're comparing two students that are like one's a 3.9 and one's a 4.0 GPA with those. So that would probably be the biggest thing too.
Would you say that you said you did undergrad at South Carolina, right? Would you say that's your favorite part? Or what would you say your favorite part of your career was getting up till now?
So I did undergrad at Kennesaw State, so just outside of Atlanta. And so I would say my favorite part, repeat it one more time. My favorite part of
So your favorite part throughout your journey, going through your maybe college, undergrad, med school, which one would you say is your most enjoyable period?
I would say the most enjoyable period was probably my 4 years of undergrad. That was the time where you're kind of exploring yourself as an adult, kind of seeing um, you definitely learn how you study, for one. I always encourage students, especially at the undergraduate level, especially the students that come through my class right now, find out how you study. That's the best time to do it because when you get into higher level courses and even graduate level courses, knowing how you study, if you don't know how you receive information, how you retain information, how you sort information, it's going to be really difficult for you, especially when you start getting into those upper level courses where it's more independent learning, I would say. The professor just gives you the information and says basically good luck. Um, and so I would say undergrad was probably my most favorite time because again, you get to learn those things. I say that's where you make the most connections as well. I've met some of my best friends in my 4 years of undergrad. I joined the greatest fraternity in the world in undergrad. I've met all my line brothers through that. And then I have, again, most of my core memories came from those 4 years. So that was probably my favorite part.
Okay, well, I mean, Dr. Hill, thank you so much for sharing all of that, taking the time to talk to me with me, taking the time to talk with me today. It's really cool to hear your path into physical therapy, what your day-to-day looks like, and how much your work really impacts people's recovery and lives. And for everyone watching, if you're interested in healthcare or even just trying to figure out what medical path might be just right for you, I hope this gave you something to think about. Make sure to like the video, leave a comment, and if you have any questions or ideas about the future, leave them down below. Thank you again. I'll see you in the next episode.